I'd like to welcome you to the WordPress Site Speed Challenge. What we're going to be learning today is how to speed up the WordPress system. And then to go a little deeper than that, we're also specifically going to learn how to boost your Google PageSpeed score. Now, this is really important no matter what kind of a website you're building, because part of Google's ranking involves how fast your site actually is, how much time it takes for each individual page on your website to actually load. When you have a slow site, not only can Google give you a lower search ranking as a result, but this can also have a negative effect on your site visitors as well. A large portion of people will actually leave a site that takes a long time to load up. Now, I want to give you guys a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be discussing tonight. And then we'll actually go through each of these things one at a time so I can show you the exact process you should go through to be able to optimize your own website. And again, this is something you can do on any website that you have, specifically WordPress websites, no matter what kind they are. Any site that wants to get any kind of search traffic can benefit from having a higher page speed. Now, first of all, if you're not aware of what Google PageSpeed is, I'm going to be talking about that in Google Analytics. And then we're going to actually move over to one of my websites, and we're going to be deactivating software that's not in use, installing some additional plugins that are going to help us to speed things up, and then finally we're going to discuss and install options for a caching plugin as well. So the first thing I want to discuss is page speed. Inside of Google Analytics, for any site that you have connected up with this service, which most people have this connected up with all of their websites, if you navigate to behavior, site speed, and speed suggestions, you can see the information that is relevant to tonight's class. Ultimately, what you are looking to do is accomplish two different things. You want to get your average page load time as low as you possibly can. However, this is not something that you will see updated instantly. For example, if you go through and do the work on a site to optimize it, you can't immediately come back to Google Analytics and find out what your page load time is. This is something where you would need to give it a little bit of time so Google can revisit the pages on your site and get a new timing for each of those pages. What you can look at that is a little more instantaneous, though, is the page speed score. Ultimately, you want to try to get this number right here as high as you possibly can for each of the different pages throughout your site. There are a variety of different things that can really cause this score to go up or down. The easiest way to get an indication of this is to click on the little total link that is in the middle here. This is going to open a new window where it'll actually scan that page on your site. And down below, it will tell you additional things that you could try to do to boost your score even higher than it already is. So this page speed score that's right here, the 94 for this page, you can see it showing up right here under this initial desktop tab. However, there is also a mobile tab here. Depending on what kind of traffic you get to your website, if you're getting more mobile traffic than desktop traffic, then you should pay a little more attention to the mobile tab as well. However, your overall page speed score is based upon your desktop score, as you can see right here, this one being a 94. Another thing worth mentioning is that sometimes you can't really make everything go away that is showing up here, that it is suggesting that you try to eliminate. For example, on this top one right here, I actually already have this website probably about 90% optimized right now. However, it's still telling me that I should do certain things like eliminating what's called render blocking JavaScript and CSS. I actually have one CSS file here, and what it means by render blocking is that in order for your whole page to load up and display, these resources have to be loaded up first. This actually slows down your page loading time. However, there are cases such as this one where you can actually do certain things, such as I can make this error go away. However, it actually ends up dropping my overall score because it causes problems elsewhere. The CSS coding that I have to load up here is simply too much coding. So there are some cases where you do have to make sacrifices. You might not be able to get a perfect score of 100. That's quite okay. You simply just want to try to get it as high as you possibly can. So now we're going to be going through and addressing a lot of these issues that show up inside of this tab here. Things like minifying our coding, things like HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. We'll be doing things like putting browser caching into our site, and also doing other things like optimizing the images that we have on our site. And we'll be able to increase the scores of a lot of pages throughout pretty much any kind of a WordPress website this way. So I'm going to come back to Google Analytics here in just a little bit. For now, we're going to proceed on and go into the WordPress site. Now on this particular WordPress site, and pretty much any WordPress site for that matter, you'll often go when you're first starting to create the site, and you'll load up all this different software. You probably have a lot of different themes and plugins that you've purchased, and even others that you might commonly find yourself downloading through the WordPress software. Well, I've commonly found when helping others out with their WordPress websites, and even going back through some of the sites that maybe I haven't looked at in a year or something like that, I noticed that there's often software that is on the site and even running on the site that's simply not used or not needed. You kind of have to make a little bit of a sacrifice here again with how much stuff you really want to put on your site. You might be inclined to try to load all of these different types of advertisements on a site like an Amazon website, for example. But sometimes going a little bit less can actually be beneficial in terms of making your site more efficient and faster running. So one of the first things that I recommend for people to do in order to boost the speed of their website is to actually go through and deactivate anything that you don't need. That simply involves going to the list of the plugins that's on your website and simply clicking on the deactivate button for anything that is not currently in use on the site. And also, you do kind of have to make sure that you're not wiping out things that you may have used previously on the website, but you're not actively using, but maybe for Amazon ads, for example, you might have a plugin that creates your Amazon ads for you, and you initially use that plugin to create those ads and put them on your website. So while you're not actively using that software, it's still technically in use on your website. So you do want to make sure you're not deactivating those. However, you'll commonly find that there's a lot of stuff that's just really not needed there. Now, what this is really going to accomplish by deactivating all of this unused software is that anytime WordPress loads a page on your public website, it actually loads all of the coding for all of WordPress and then also for all of the different software that is activated on your site. This is plugins and the theme that you have activated as well. So by having more software activated, you simply have more code that has to be processed every single time a page is going to be loaded. Now, to a certain extent, you can kind of overcome this problem by caching the pages on your public website. However, fine-tuning all of your software and getting rid of the stuff you really don't need can also help to speed things up on your end. You can't serve these back-end files, for example, the administration area. You can't do all of this off of cached pages. So every time you're trying to load up something in here, if you find it going really, really slow, it could be because you just simply have too much software that's activated, especially if some of the software is really, really large. You could have one really large plugin that causes more of a strain than 10 or 20 really tiny plugins combined do. So it's not really a count of plugins that you should be after, but it's more efficient plugins and simply selecting the bare minimums of what you need to accomplish what you're trying to do on your website. So beyond your plugins, you also have your theme to worry about. However, in most cases, you usually won't have more than one theme activated. There are a couple of special occasions where you might use two themes and one might be used for mobile traffic on your site and the other is used for standard desktop traffic. That kind of a situation is quite okay. So it's really more the plugins that you need to be focusing on. One other thing worth mentioning is that you don't have to necessarily delete the software. As you can see here, I have this one plugin that is deactivated currently, but the software still exists on my website. Well, unless I actually have this activated, it's not going to run the code from this plugin every time WordPress is loaded up. So I don't really have to worry about the deactivated ones. It's just simply making sure that what I have here is going to kind of be the bare minimum of what I need to accomplish things. Now, the next thing that I do after I've tidied up all the software on my site and kind of taken a look at where I might be standing in Google Analytics is actually go and install some more software on my website. Now, with what I just said about deactivating software that we don't really need, it might seem a little counterintuitive initially to then go and put more software on the website in an attempt to speed it up. However, all of these different plugins that I use for this purpose are specifically designed to help optimize or speed things up in some manner, with one exception. And that's my first one here, this Simple Site Speed plugin. It doesn't speed anything up. It allows me to time the loading speeds on my site. All of the other ones, though, are going to actually help to assist in the speeding up of my website. So what you will want to do is simply go into your website, go to plugins, and add new. All of these different plugins that we're going to be adding in, they're all free. There are a couple of them, I believe, that have premium versions. However, that's not something that you need to worry about. The way I'm going to be teaching you guys to utilize all this software today actually allows you to avoid the use of those premium upgrades. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail as we go through and install the software. I'll point out the ones that have the premium features and how we have accomplished those features using a different piece of software instead. So the first one that you want to search for and activate is this one right here. It's called Simple Site Speed. And what this plugin is going to do is when you load up a page on your public website, I believe I'm viewing a cached page. When you load up a page on your public website, it's going to show you a loading time down here in the bottom left-hand corner. You can see this page took 1.258 seconds to load up for me. So this is something that we're going to be using to judge how effective this work is. So I recommend kind of starting off here, seeing how fast or slow your website is, take note of the time, and then as you progress and finish up with all this work, you can kind of see the changes that have been made to that. However, this is software that I would still kind of consider to be unuseful after you have made these changes. So once you have gone through and optimized a website, make sure you come back and deactivate this Simple Site Speed plugin because you won't need it anymore after that time. There are also no additional configuration options or anything you have to worry about having to do with that plugin. So all you really need to do there is simply to install it and activate it on your site until you're done optimizing. Now the next one you want to install is called JCH Optimized. Now this plugin actually does have some additional settings. However, if you take a look at this little note that is up at the top of my settings page, you can see that it says this plugin requires a greater version of PHP than I actually have installed on this particular web server. Initially, I almost bypassed this plugin for this one particular reason because it said it's not compatible. However, after doing some fairly thorough testing with it, I actually figured out that despite this message, this plugin does actually work and do what it is supposed to be doing. And it actually does a really, really good job at it. I really could not find anything else out there on the market that does a better job of what this is trying to do. What this is doing is it is compressing things like HTML and JavaScript and also CSS files that are on the public side of the website. So this is going to take a lot of the coding that we already have on the website, on the public pages of the website, and it's going to shrink it down to a bare minimum amount of coding that it still needs to operate and still work in the same manner. So if you have this higher version of PHP running on your server, that's great. It might even do an even better job for you. However, if you do see this message, you don't really have to worry about it too much because it is still functioning for you. So with that said, my next plugin that I install is called Async JS and CSS. Once you install and activate this plugin, there is a settings page found through this settings link right here. And on this settings page, you get to mark whether you want JavaScript and or CSS to be loading asynchronously. What this is actually doing, if you recall back on this page where I was showing you the different suggestions that this is making to increase our page speed, this is actually the render blocking JavaScript and CSS that it is referring to. So if I click on one of these, you can see that it's telling me to optimize the CSS delivery, but it doesn't mention anything about JavaScript here. Well, the JavaScript that used to be mentioned here has gone away because of these options that are up at the top. I'm loading the JavaScript asynchronously now, which means the page content, the actual text and stuff that's on my page, is allowed it to load first before it loads up all of the extra JavaScript coding that's on this website. Now you can do the same thing with CSS. However, I really have not found this to be beneficial to the speed of WordPress websites in general. One of the big problems here is that the amount of coding in the CSS for most WordPress websites is actually a lot of coding. To load it up asynchronously, the best way to do it is with this default option. So if I were to turn this on, it's going to be selecting this default option right here. This loads all the CSS coding up into the document header, and this actually ends up causing another problem. It will cause this prioritize visible content error to show up in the page speed, to the point where the visible content on the page, the actual text that people are seeing on your live website, it is so overwhelmed by all this CSS coding that has to load up first that it takes longer for it to actually show that content. You can get around that problem by using one of these other 4 options here. However, there really seems to be an issue with maintaining the look of your website. I found that all 4 of these other options, while they will help to solve those issues, it simply messes up the way your website looks. So that's the main reason why I don't use this particular option. You can try enabling it and seeing if you get a better score and a faster speed off of Google as a result. However, you'll likely find the same thing that I have experienced, is that you're better off just simply not using this option and taking this minor hit with having this CSS message show up. Ultimately, this is not going to drop your score very much at all. You can still get into the mid to upper 90s by still having this consider fixing message showing up for the render blocking CSS. Now, one of the next plugins that I install is called Image Optimizer. What this actually does is reduces all the file sizes for the images that are on your WordPress site. So we would be talking about the images that we have uploaded to WordPress that are displayed within our page content. However, there are also some other types of images that are on your site that can still be optimized. For example, you might have some Amazon pages where you have certain Amazon plugins that are using buy now buttons, for example, or various graphics within them. Even in addition to the plugins, such as the ad plugins, there are even other plugins that you might be using, especially if you have a lot of graphics heavy options on your site. Basically, any image that is showing up on your site as long as it is located on your website itself, you can optimize it to make it smaller. However, you don't have to sacrifice quality in order to make this happen. You can actually see here for this particular page how it's pointing out a couple of particular images on my page. What's important to understand here is the actual destination of these images. Whenever you see this message showing up for a page on your site, you want to expand it so you can see what I'm seeing here, and then you hover over the text in the white boxes and it'll show you the full URL of that image that it is referencing. Take note of what is in the URL right past the words WP content. For this one, it's saying uploads/2013/9, and then it is the actual name of the image file. Well, when I see uploads after WP content, that tells me that it is a normal picture that I uploaded through the WordPress system, where I'm editing the page and I click on the little Add Media button up in the top left and I upload an image that way. Well, beyond that, there are other kinds of images. For example, on this particular page that I was showing you with this Amazon ad, that would be this one here. On this particular page, if I hover over the image that needs to be optimized, you can see that it says WP content/plugins. And then it goes on to name where that image is found and the file name for it. Well, this is important to notice whenever you see something that says WP content/ and then anything else besides uploads. You will need to take an additional step in this image optimization process. So first, get your image plugin installed and activated on the site. Then you can visit the settings page right here through this link. That will take you to this page here. The first thing you want to do on this basic settings page is to check this box right here to remove metadata. This actually prevents some potential problems occurring from converting these images. And then you also want to set a bulk delay here. This is just to be on the safe side. I put a 15-second delay. And this just simply delays how quickly the images are actually converted for you when you run this conversion. On shared web servers, this is going to be more important because you don't want to cause a bunch of lag for everyone else that is using your server. Finally, we get to the Advanced Settings tab. And on this tab, this is where what we were just looking at before becomes much more important. This box right here, folders to optimize. If we have any images that are showing up in the Google PageSpeed notifications that do not list WP content/uploads as that part of the URL, if it's anything else besides that, then you're going to need to add something into this box here in order for those images to get picked up and optimized too. So what you want to do to start with is select the path that it is providing for you right up here above the box and paste that into the box down below. As long as what you are going for is somewhere within the WP content folder, you could likely use this setting that that you see on my screen now, where you simply add WP-content and then another / onto the directory that is already provided for you right up above. What this is going to do is allow this plugin to look into this particular folder to scan for additional images that need to be converted. So that's how you actually get rid of some of those additional settings. Sorry, I think my audio cut out there for a second. You hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry about that. Sometimes this thing loses its audio connection briefly every now and again. So once we have this plugin installed, you can see that this actually completes our speed plugin installation. However, there is a little bit more that we need to accomplish with this. Beyond just simply setting up this plugin, we actually need to go through and do all of these image optimizations. You can do certain things like scheduling the optimizations to happen, for example, by using this checkbox here. This can be a good idea perhaps if you had a very large site with a large amount of images to where you wanted this to be done a little more slowly over time. However, since we're trying to get this all optimized in basically one fell swoop here, we want to be able to do all of this instantly before we actually proceed on with the next part of the lesson, which is going to be to cache the pages on our website. The reason why we want to be doing the image optimization and even all the other things that we've already done with the other plugins, why we want to be doing all that first is because if we set up the caching afterwards, it's not going to take all of this into account. We're going to be caching the slower version of our public site instead. So with that said, I'm going to save my changes here that include, I think my login is timed out. Okay, my folder is still saved. So I have my folder saved in now. Once we have this done and we have these settings set up for the plugin, what we want to do next is to actually optimize all of these different images. We do this now through a couple of new links that this plugin creates for us, and this is under the media menu. We want to go to bulk optimize. Now right here you can see how we have an option to choose how much of a delay, if we want to make this go a little slower or faster, depending on the number of images we actually have to do. But it's important to notice that there are two different sections here. Up at the top, we have the media library. These are going to be the images. You can see there's a count of them right here. These are going to be the images that we have actually uploaded to our site. So that is these images here, where it's saying WP content /uploads. These are the ones that the plugin will pick up by default. However, for this second section, optimize everything else, this is why we provided that folder in the previous settings screen. This is actually going to allow us to scan that entire folder and to then optimize any images that are found there. So this two-part process allows us to optimize the uploads, and then it allows us to optimize the other images that are on our site as well. Now this actual process here, depending on how much of a delay you actually put in, can take a little bit of time for it to actually go through. However, I would recommend letting this complete before you actually go through and do the next part of this, which is to get these pages cached. So you can see now it's reducing the file sizes on these images for me, but most importantly, it's not just doing the main image. It's actually doing all of the different thumbnail sizes for me too. And it's going to be doing this for each of the different pictures that are on my site. So you can see the little percentages here that are being marked saying it has reduced that image by a certain amount. So all of these reductions in the image size, every single one of them ends up meaning that the image is going to load faster for viewers of your public website. And the way this is set up by default, it's not going to be degrading the quality of your pictures either. It's going to be shooting to keep them all looking exactly the same, but simply optimizing the image files. Sometimes you get a pretty large reduction in file size as a result, and other times it's a little less significant, 5 or 10%, but still any savings that you can get in this type of a process can be a big help for you. So obviously you want to let this continue and finish, and then you want to do the scan for everything else as well and let that finish before you proceed on to the next part. The next part is going to be to look at our options for caching plugins. Now our caching plugins, there's actually a number of them out there. You have likely used or at least tried one of them at some point. So I want to discuss, at least in some kind of detail, each of the three main caching plugins that I have really done a lot of testing and have a lot of experience with, to tell you kind of what the pros and cons are of each, and ultimately which one I use, why I use it, and then we'll actually get that set up and running on the site. Now, one of the main ones that people are familiar with is called W3 Total Cache. Searching in the wrong bar here. W3 Total Cache is a really good plugin. It has a lot more options in it than I've really found in the other caching plugins that are out there. A lot of people use it. You can see there's over 1 million active installs on it. And it kind of claims itself to be the most complete, the most comprehensive caching platform that is really out there. Initially, I really liked what this plugin had to offer. A lot of the different things that I was trying to do on my site in terms of caching and making the things like coding smaller, this plugin can actually do a lot of that stuff for you. However, I didn't really like the options that were available for it. And ultimately, after I got it all set up as customized as I possibly could, it kind of seemed to have slower page loading times, significantly slower page loading times, in fact, than all the other options that I've tried out. The main benefit to it is that everything's kind of all in one place, and it does give you a pretty high page speed score. So it focuses on accomplishing a lot of these different things that Google PageSpeed suggests for you to fix. However, when it comes to the actual speed of your site, it almost seems like there's so much going on in the plugin that it still kind of slows it down. Or maybe it's the way that it actually goes about caching the page information. Ultimately, in my testing, though, I really found for it to be the slowest out of all of the options, even though it did deliver, I'd say, the second highest page speed scores. Now, another one, and this is one that I actually used on a very large number of my websites up until recently, was called WP Supercache. This one kind of works the same way as W3 Total Cache, except it doesn't have all the extra options for minifying your code and for doing content asynchronously and things of that nature. However, it seems to have the best support for mobile traffic. What I mean by that is the plugin itself, it doesn't actually produce a mobile version of your website. However, if you already have a theme on your site that is producing both a normal desktop version and a mobile version of your site, then this plugin can automatically handle that kind of a situation, and it can send the mobile traffic to a cached version of that mobile page, whereas the desktop users see a cached version of the desktop page. It's also really flexible in terms of weeding out particular types of situations where if you have a membership site, for example, and maybe you didn't want your logged in members to be seeing the cached versions of pages, for example. Those types of situations, I find this to be the best choice. However, I find that it delivers a lower page speed score than the other options that I've tried out, even though the loading times on the pages are actually very fast, what I would call the second fastest page loading time. But again, the page speed score that's actually within Google ends up being a little lower in this case. The one plugin that I was really able to find that had enough flexibility for me also offered a high page speed score along with a fast loading time is actually one called WP Fastest Cache. For once, the name of the plugin actually didn't lie. Now, this seems to be more of a newer plugin. There's only 90,000 people that are using this plugin compared to the other two, which I believe they both had 1 million plus active installs. While this plugin doesn't have the massive amount of features that you'll find in those other two plugins, when it comes down to the numbers and the things that really matter, the page loading time and the page speed score, I found this to test out considerably better than those two really well-known caching options that millions of people are using. And so this is something that I've actually started using across all of my websites more recently as a result. There could be some cases, though, where you may still want to use a different option. WP Super Cache would be my second choice to go to. In certain cases, like membership websites or maybe sites where you had an overwhelming percentage of your traffic being mobile traffic, then this might be your better option. Otherwise, I would recommend to go for WP Fastest Cache. With that knowledge, once you can decide on an actual caching plugin, then you can go ahead with the installation of it. I wanted to be sure, though, to discuss those three main options for you, though, because it's not always cut and dry which one may be the best one to use. Sometimes you need those extra features and the more complicated plugins, and other times you're just simply focused on speed. So for a lot of just basic websites where you have a series of public pages, like an Amazon affiliate website, WP Fastest Cache will likely end up being your best choice. Get this plugin installed, or any other choice you might decide to go with. Get it activated on your site, and then we're ready to actually proceed with configuring this. Now you can reach this menu page right here where it says WP Fastest Cache. Ultimately, this plugin can do a lot more than what it already does, which is kind of what I found so astounding about it, is that for being a free plugin that also offers a premium version of it, I find the free version to be really, really good. However, this doesn't mean that you have to go out and buy the premium version. I have no connection to this plugin whatsoever, so it's not something I'm promoting or trying to get people to buy. In fact, I'd actually prefer for you to have a free way that you could go about getting all these sites optimized, which is what a lot of those other speed plugins I had you install previously are accomplishing for you. There's certain things like this option here, Minify JavaScript, where you can't use it in this plugin. But one of the other plugins that I had you installed, the JCH Optimized plugin, it is actually taking care of some of these other options for you. So with that said, those drawbacks to this plugin not having the premium version of it is quite okay, because we have replaced basically all of these features except for maybe one of them with another plugin that is out there. The one feature we have really not replaced, you can see right here, mobile theme, how this plugin is not going to serve up a cached version of our mobile theme for us. We can force it to show a cached version of the desktop version of our site. However, I really don't want that to be happening. I'd rather serve a non-cached version of the mobile site to the actual mobile viewers, especially with Google making their changes this year requiring that sites be mobile responsive now. So with that said, I'd really recommend going through and checking off everything that you can possibly check off here. The one exception where you may want to come back and disable something, at least for a short period of time, would be this one option up at the top here, logged in users, where you're not showing a cached version for logged in users. Sometimes, as the logged in user, you do want to see the cached version of it, especially if you're doing some testing, trying to figure out whether these changes are faster than perhaps another option. Maybe you want to compare 2 or 3 of the different caching plugins to see which one does a better job for you. You might need to disable certain options like this one to be able to test the speed. For the most part, though, you can leave all of these checked. Simply save your changes. The other main thing you need to worry about in this plugin, though, is the cache timeout. This determines how frequently your pages will have to be recached. In a lot of cases, for Amazon affiliate websites, you'll likely go through and create the content for your website, and then you might just leave it there for months or maybe even years at a time without touching it. So depending on how frequently you're actually going to be making updates to this site, this can kind of determine what your timeout rules should be. At the very, very least, though, I'd recommend going down to once a week. But there would be a lot of cases where you have your site completely constructed and you're not planning on revisiting it for a while. You can definitely set this to a much higher time period, once a month, or possibly even more than that. When you first visit this page, though, you're not going to see this down below. You're going to have to click up here where it says Add a New Rule. Then you're going to have to select the request URI. You just want to select all for that, and that's going to be for all the different pages on your site. You can set different timeouts for different sections of your website. If you had particular reasons why you needed maybe the home page to update more frequently, or you had certain pages on your site, if you select is equal to, you can choose specific pages on your site to actually select. Otherwise, though, you just go down here and select your time limit, once a week, once a month, once a year, and simply save your changes, and you'll have your rules showing up like you see here on my screen. This simply tells the caching plugin how often to discard the cached pages and to refresh it and create a new one. Now you have other options in this plugin, such as image optimization. This is also a premium feature. However, that Image Optimizer plugin that we're using is actually doing the same thing that this was going to do for us. So another example of we have replaced this functionality with another free option that is out there. Beyond this, though, this actually sets up everything that you need to have in order for this whole strategy to go into effect. Once you get this whole process down, you can actually run through each of your individual websites in a pretty short period of time to get all of this set up. However, once you get to this point, I still wouldn't consider yourself to be completely finished. There is a little bit more that you can do to kind of speed this whole process along. The first one being that you can actually help to generate the caching of these pages. What I mean by that is when somebody visits a live page on your site, if it needs to generate a new version, a new cached version of that page because it's old or because a cached version of it doesn't exist, then it's going to have to create that. Ultimately, that visit to your website where the cached version of your page is getting generated, that one visit is going to end up being slower as a result because it's got to do that extra generation. So what you can actually do is to go through your live website, the various pages that are on it, start with your home page, and just simply navigate to all of the different pages that are on your site. The first time you go to it, you may notice the loading time that shows up down at the bottom might end up increasing quite significantly. Well, I already have, I believe, all the pages on this particular site cached already, so I get a pretty quick loading time each time I try to visit one of them. However, it's important that you go through this on your own site, or else when Google tries to go and revisit your site, if they happen to be the first ones to set on a particular page of your site, then they might get that slow loading time. And as a result, you can actually have the opposite of what you thought was going to happen occur. Your page loading time can end up increasing instead of decreasing. If that happens, though, don't worry too much about it. I've actually experienced the same kind of thing with my own sites. As you can see right here, a couple of these large spikes that I have in here are from doing a variety of different tests on this particular website. And then Google got in and actually indexed a version of one of my pages where that had a really large loading time. Like this one here took 12 seconds. This was definitely one of the generation page views where it's actually creating that cached version of the page. Ultimately, though, as time goes on, it will cache in the much lower access times. You can see right here, a lot of these pages are actually getting under 1 second, and a number of them are even under a half of a second in terms of my page load time. And this also boosts my page speed score up into the 90s. One other thing worth mentioning about the caching plugin is this is kind of a con, I would say, to using this particular plugin. I can't confirm whether it actually generates a new version of one of your cached pages when you go and update a page on your site. So let's say you take an existing page on your site, you find some text that you want to edit, or maybe you want to add in something new to that existing text. I can't guarantee that this plugin is actually going to refresh the cached version of that page for you at that time. However, it does have an option up here at the top where you can delete the cache or delete the cache and the minified CSS and JavaScript. If you're making updates to your page content after you have cached all of your pages, you may need to go back through and delete your cache right here. You shouldn't have to do this bottom one. The minified CSS and JavaScript can likely remain the same unless you were to perhaps install a new plugin onto your site. You might need to regenerate your CSS and your JavaScript. Now, one other thing that's worth mentioning having to do with the minified CSS and JavaScript. Sometimes software that you have installed on a WordPress website can actually not work correctly when you mess with the JavaScript that's going on the live site. If you have a plugin that is very JavaScript heavy on your public website, and after you go through and do these optimizations, if you see that any of that stuff is not working anymore on your public website, you may need to scale back the amount of optimization that you're doing. Try getting rid of, in the Async plugin, try wiping out one of these two or even both of these checkboxes for the detecting the script tags. Try eliminating one at a time. Remove the cached version of your pages and see if it works again. If it doesn't, try removing both of them. You may even have to step all the way backwards and not load JavaScript asynchronously. There are some cases where this simply is not going to work with particular plugins that are really JavaScript heavy on the public side of the site. However, in a lot of cases, you'll find that things should still work as normal with these different options enabled. It looks like once I navigated away from this page, like the optimization stopped. Within media and unoptimized images, you can actually go and see what images are not optimized already, and there's a little Optimize Now link that you can click to perform those optimizations. I wanted to demonstrate at least one of these here for you guys, so I can show you how this actually can make instantaneous improvements to your PageSpeed score. If you look at this one here, I have leaking down feathers on the floor and the down feather pillow fight. I believe that's going to be these two images that are right here. So we can click on the Optimize Now link and individually select these images. However, if you were doing the bulk optimize and you let there and sit that whole page process for you, you shouldn't have to go through it individually like I'm doing here. I'm just trying to get these couple of images on this one page taken care of, so then we can actually see the results. It's possible this image might be part of that too. Okay, so now that I have those images optimized, again, this is something I really should be doing before my caching system is set up. However, since I have made changes to my optimized images here, I actually would want to go through and delete the cache that is on my website. And then I would want to revisit that page of my site. So this is the leaking down feathers page. So I want to revisit this page on my site. And then finally, I can go back over to Google and get updates over there. So back over here on Google, I can reanalyze a page that's currently showing up here. So right here I have on my existing scores, I have a 67 on mobile and I have an 89 on my desktop. So after going through and optimizing those images, I should end up with some kind of a change here. However, you know what I did? I actually went higher. Sorry, let me show this to you. I went higher here. If you see these reduced server response time messages, this likely means that Google picked up one of the non-cached versions where it had to actually go through and generate that for you. So you can see it had a slow response time because it had to sit there and wait for it to generate that page, whereas it's not going to get this really low page time like I show up with here. The reason why this happened is because of this option I disabled at the beginning of this class. When you're going through and viewing the different pages on your public site, you want to make sure this option is unchecked. And this way it's actually going to generate new versions of each of these pages for you and get those cached up. So you can see I'm not getting the bar going across the top of my site, and I'm actually not even getting the timing going on down in the bottom corner for me either. The way this works in this one particular plugin is kind of one of the cons that I consider. WP Supercache seems to have better options to avoid this type of a situation, but ultimately once you get all of the pages cached, this WP Fastest Cache plugin does do the best job in terms of delivering lower response times and a higher page speed score. So I believe it's been at least 30 seconds by now, so should be able to recheck this The reason why I say 30 seconds, if you look down at the bottom, this page actually caches these results for 30 seconds. So if you want to go through and reanalyze a page, you need to give it a minute first before you can actually do that, or else it's simply going to show you the exact same information that you had the first time. So now for mobile, I have a 70 and my desktop score is up to a 92. And you can see that the mention of the images is no longer in there. You can actually find that down in the past rules now. So that one image optimization plugin accomplishes optimizing these images for me. The other plugins are doing things like enabling the compression, minifying things like my CSS. However, it's still noteworthy to point out how it's not always going to eliminate all of these different messages that are here. For example, it says here that I should minify JavaScript, I should minify HTML, and I should leverage browser caching. Well, I have software, the things that I just got done installing, all of this stuff is taking care of these three things here. It just simply may not be reduced as low as it could possibly go. Obviously, Google is noting that there is some kind of a room for improvement with these things to show it there. But again, it's not always feasible to get a perfect score within a WordPress site. You simply want to try to get yourself 90 and above is the mark that I shoot for. I tend to get pretty decent search rankings when I'm up in the 90 to 95 range for the page speed. Some things here you may not be able to fix at all. For example, right here, it's telling me that I should leverage browser caching on this particular resource. And this resource is the Google Analytics code. It's currently set to cache for 2 hours, and it's telling me I should try to set this much longer. I think you need to set it to like a week or so for it to not show up in this message. Well, this is Google coding. This is obviously something that they have set up. So certain things like this, it's really not feasible to try and eliminate. Honestly, I don't think Google should even be flagging a type of a situation like this, because this is using code that they provide to you, and they want you to use it like that. They don't want you to modify it. So certain things, certain messages like that, you can definitely ignore in here. Now, even though I've gone through and made all these changes and gotten a really nice desktop score here, you'll still notice how my mobile score is not horrible, but it's lower than what my desktop score is. A large reason for this is because you're no longer getting the cached version of the page. You're basically just serving your normal mobile web page to these users. So this is why I mentioned that if you have a very large amount of mobile traffic on your site, if it outweighs the desktop traffic that's on your site especially, then you might be better off using WP Supercache. You can likely get a higher page speed score using that plugin than you can this particular one for mobile sites. Things like your server response time, for example, it shows up here. It's not too horrible. It's responding in 0.89 seconds. They actually, if you read their recommendations about response time, it says it should be under 2 seconds. So I'm still within their ranges, but for mobile websites, they obviously are expecting that to be a little bit lower because it doesn't flag it at all here for my desktop. And in fact, it even says down here that I've passed that particular rule for the desktop. So they're simply looking for the mobile pages to be even faster loading than your standard desktop pages are. Regardless, though, making these changes, doing all of these optimizations that I've walked you through today, it definitely improves both of these scores for you. My mobile score before I did all of these optimizations on this page was significantly lower than 70. Depending on how I set up a WordPress website, sometimes these page speed scores by default end up being in the 30 to 50 neighborhood. They're really that low. And just making these couple of adjustments and updates to your site can make a big difference. That is a good question, Ran. Something that I've done a lot of experimenting with too. He's saying maybe combine 2 caching plugins, one for mobile, one for regular. That is a possibility, or to maybe upgrade to the premium version could be the one situation where going for the premium version of this WP Fastest Cache plugin could be beneficial to you. I can't guarantee that, though. I have not used the premium version of this personally, so I can't say for sure that having access to this additional option here, that it will indeed make that score significantly higher. However, having access to all these different options on here should boost those scores more to a certain degree. I have tried combining 2 caching plugins together to kind of use the features that I like from one and the features that I like from another and try to have everything else disabled. It kind of worked, but the at least one of the plugins was specifically telling me that it's not compatible with the other plugin that I was using. I want to say I was trying to use W3 Total Cache and WP Super Cache together to basically use the mobile options and stuff off of WP Super Cache to use the normal page caching with WP Super Cache. But then I was using W3 for all the minifying features and the browser caching. And it did seem to work. But again, it was giving me, at least in the administration area, it was giving me error messages in a way telling me that this stuff wasn't compatible. It did seem to work, but again, the final numbers when I compared my speeds using those two together with using options separately, or especially using WP Fastest Cache on its own, the two combined just simply came out to be slower, unfortunately. I do think if you could find something that would just allow you to serve up that mobile option would be beneficial. However, I was not able to do this. Not something that seems to exist currently, except for using other titles that have it already included. So for those of you that are on a site that is very, very mobile heavy, upgrading to the premium might be worthwhile through this one plugin. If not, try using WP Super Cache instead. If nothing else, WP Super Cache can deliver pretty good loading times on the pages throughout your site. Now, there is one final thing that I wanted to mention before I proceed on to the open question and answer session for tonight's class. This has to do with something new you may have heard about called AMP. This is something Google is doing to try to basically come up with a universal mobile code that could be used for mobile websites to make them load a lot faster. I wanted to make sure, even though this is something that got announced after I started putting together this training class for you guys, I still wanted to look into it and to make sure this was or wasn't something that could actually help with speeding up a website. There is a plugin called AMP that you can actually download for free through WordPress. And this plugin will set up these additional mobile pages for you. However, it doesn't really just work like that on its own. What you're basically doing with this AMP plugin is you're creating a mobile version of your website, but then you still need other software that's actually going to deliver that mobile version to your public website visitors. Certain plugins like W3 Total Cache seem to have options built in that would allow you to accomplish something like this. For my particular website though, and it may also be the case for a lot of your websites as well, if you follow my training and use a lot of my software recommendations, you'll know that I recommend using the Weaver theme. Weaver 2 previously, now more recently it's been upgraded to Weaver Extreme. Both of these themes automatically produce a mobile version of your website for you and automatically forwards the mobile traffic along to those versions of the website. So things like the AMP edition really don't work in with this anymore, simply because it conflicts with the mobile version of the Weaver theme. However, if you use a different theme, one that does not have a mobile option, you might want to experiment with using this AMP plugin and then possibly using the W3 Total Cache plugin to where you can redirect your mobile traffic to the AMP version of your web page. And the AMP version of your web page basically just ends up being an AMP directory added on to the end of your existing pages. It could also be AMP is equal to 1, I believe, also pulls up those alternate pages for you. This again is something that could potentially help some of you with increasing your mobile page speed numbers, especially if you are not using the Weaver theme, if you do not have a mobile-friendly version of your site that will automatically get served up. And over the course of time, 6 months to a year from now, you'll likely be hearing a lot more about Google AMP and may want to explore getting that set up on your site at one point. So I did want to make sure to at least include some mention of that in this training episode to make it relevant for a longer period of time into the future at least. Now, once again, this is something that I would highly, highly recommend for you to go through and complete this process on any WordPress site that you use, no matter what it's for, assuming you're looking to get any kind of public traffic from it. Go through this process, optimize your site, get the cached versions of your pages loaded up, and then you can revisit Google Analytics and get this to actually show you some more recent data. I've found sometimes that you can kind of force it to try to load up your new PageSpeed scores by simply loading a new section of time into this software here. You can see, at least on some of these, how it is. It's not giving me page loading time data, but it's giving me page speed score data for a lot of these things, to the point where You can often see more immediate updates in bulk this way, instead of having to go through one page at a time and clicking on the page speed suggestions and letting it pull up new numbers for you here. You may simply be able to select a new period of time up top and get it to refresh all of this information for you down below. Again, your goal should be to try to get as many of your pages as you possibly can up into the 90s. You especially want to make sure this is happening with the most popular pages on your site. If you know that you have pages that have halfway decent search rankings, the higher you can get this page speed score and the lower you can get your average loading time, the higher those search rankings are going to be able to go. It's going to be simply one extra factor that's going to help to boost those up for you. As I mentioned earlier, I am hosting an open question and answer session to go along with this training class. Any questions that you might have about anything I've discussed so far tonight, or even other things you might be wondering about how fast your website runs or what can affect the speed of your website in general, I welcome any of those questions. Please enter them into the chat box at any time. If I'm already in the middle of an answer, I will get to your question as quickly as I possibly can. That's a really good question, Ran. Sure, I can talk about those. Ran is asking, what about the CDNs? A CDN is a content delivery network. I personally do not use them on my websites, but there may be some of you that do. I'm pretty sure all three of the different caching plugins that I talked about, W3 Total Cache, WP Super Cache, and WP Fastest Cache, I believe all three of them offer some CDN options. What's going on with a CDN is you're basically loading your content of your site onto a different network. And then the CDN will actually provide that content when your web page is being loaded up. The most commonly used one, or at least the only one I've really done any experimenting with, is Amazon Web Services. However, I really don't use it for this purpose. If you have a website in a super competitive niche, and maybe you've done everything that you possibly can to try to speed it up, exploring the CDN route could maybe be beneficial for you, but you really need to be able to justify the extra cost for something like this. I don't think there are any options that are free, and if they are, they're probably not going to really be fast options, where basically for every certain amount of data that you transfer off of these networks, you get charged a certain amount of money. So you definitely need for a site to be able to cover those costs, to even be able to begin to explore it. I guess that's the main reason why it's not a regular part of my strategy. It can definitely help to speed up the loading times of your web pages. However, for the extra cost that is involved, and also considering that when I first create a site and I first go through and do all this optimization to it, I still don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt in a lot of cases that the website will be successful. There are cases where I put all of my ducks in a row, so to speak, build my site just how I should build it, but maybe there's something that I overlooked in the process. Maybe the competition for that niche or the keywords that I'm targeting, maybe it's a lot higher than I had really thought it was going to be. There are cases like that where not a lot of my sites, but at least a small percentage of them simply end up not working out for me. And so another reason there why this is not something that I would initially go and just load up onto every possible website. But again, if this is something that you would like to explore, only do it for a site that's already fairly popular, and definitely only do it for a site that is actively referring Amazon sales, because you do want to have, I'd recommend at least $50, maybe even $100 a month worth of income coming in from that particular site to justify the extra costs that one of these CDNs would deliver to you. It will help to boost your speed, but it's not going to be such a major difference to where you should be bending over backwards to try to get this set up for all of your sites. On my pages, you can actually see how, as I showed you before, my average page loading time, how a lot of them end up being something like a half a second or a second or less for a lot of these pages. I'm not getting the correct data showing up for me now. Here we go. Just the page I was looking at before. Certain pages of your site where if you had an immense amount of content on one of those pages, let's say you needed to pile in thousands of words worth of content, images and videos and all kinds of stuff like that. That's really more of a case where I could see one of these content delivery networks being beneficial for you, where you simply have a lot of traffic and a lot of content that you want to deliver. Videos, especially if you were to be hosting your own videos on your sites, that's really probably one of the most common uses for the content delivery networks. That's kind of the one area of them that I actually do use them for some self-hosted videos. When it comes to text and stuff like that, though, as long as you set up your optimization correctly, you should be able to see a lot of your pages getting to a second or less for the loading time on them. So I don't find that extra expense for the content delivery network to really be that essential. Oh, you're quite welcome, Ren. That's actually an excellent idea, Ren. How about offering this as a service to a local business? Most local businesses, if they are running off of a WordPress system, likely do not know about all of these different aspects to it. They just simply use WordPress because it is a simple system to use. It doesn't require, all that extra technical knowledge and stuff like that to pull it off. So I think that is a big appeal for WordPress for the average user. And as a result, they don't usually know about a lot of the technical aspects that are behind it. And so things like the speed of their site, they're not really going to be overly focused on that. But if you can, if you were to do something like that, offering this service to a local business, I think you could definitely do that, especially if you can show them some results, show them, take an existing website that has some existing search rankings and maybe some lower stats with loading times and the page speed. Do this optimization work to it while documenting everything, record your times and basically create a case study to show what kind of an increase you can deliver. Obviously, each individual site and all the different keywords and stuff can work different from one case to the next, but by getting some kind of a proof like that you can show them, something that makes sense to them, because a lot of the technical stuff, likely won't end up making sense to them. But something like a case study video where you can show how this actually affects their website and what it can do for them would make it a much more appealing sell to them. I certainly think you could charge a local business easily $100, if not maybe even more, depending on what kind of results you could show from that case study, what kind of references or something you might have to back up your sales offer. Certainly think that is a good possibility. Victor is asking, the rearranging and compressing and minifying of many CSS and JavaScript files is too complex and time-consuming for me. Is there a cost-efficient independent contractor I can hire who will do it? You likely could, Victor. I know I tried to explain a lot of that stuff as I was going through it. Ultimately, though, the things that you're going to be installing on this website that are going to be doing that kind of stuff for you, it's really all going to be taken care of automatically. The only thing you really need to do with the way I've taught to set up all these plugins and to set up the settings on them, the only thing you really have to do to make sure it's all correct is just to visit your live website to view your public pages and just to make sure everything's working. You know, anything on your site that moves by itself, animations, things that will change maybe when you hover over them and stuff like that, those are going to be your aspects of your site that are likely controlled by JavaScript. Just simply try to test out those features and make sure they're working. You could, I'm sure, find an independent contractor who would do something like this for you, especially if you provided them with this training video perhaps and said, you know, I want this done to each of my sites. And would you do it for me? How much would you charge me? Especially if you had a larger number of sites. I'm sure you could find somebody like that, possibly on a site like Fiverr. You might need to go to kind of a step up from there, something like Scriptlance or Freelancer, where you actually find a freelancer contractor that could do something like that. However, I would recommend to give it one shot on your own with your sites. Just go through and set up the different plugins that I've talked to you about. The basic settings on them, JCH Optimized, for example, that's going to be doing a lot of the minifying and stuff for you. You don't need to worry about changing anything on that. So all you're doing there is installing and activating that plugin. The other one, WP Fastest Cache, is going to be doing that stuff as well. However, this again is as simple as clicking on some checkboxes. There's nothing else that you really have to worry about for there either. So for the most part, all of these different complicated technical things that we're really doing to the website here, you don't really have to have the technical knowledge or really even know what it's doing to be able to accomplish this kind of stuff. You just let the plugin take care of it for you automatically. The one case that I mentioned where you would want to go to your live website and test things out to make sure everything's working okay. If it's not working okay, the easiest adjustment you'd be able to make is just to disable these three options in the Async JavaScript and CSS plugin. This should fix whatever problem was created with the JavaScript on the live website. That's actually a pretty good question too, Ryan. he's saying, I can see the potential dangers of fixing the site like this and basically crashing it along the way, because all these changes are kind of done on like the system level. He said, can you please elaborate about what can be best practices to work fast but carefully, more than just simply backing up your site at the beginning? Sure. For the most part, a lot of these different plugins, the Async plugin, JCH Optimized, and the caching plugin, all of those, any changes that they make in terms of caching information or minifying code that's on your website, things of that nature, all of that stuff can simply be wiped out by just removing those plugins, by just simply deactivating them. The changes that they're making, it's basically looking at your live website and kind of taking a snapshot of it and then saving that as an actual HTML file, so it can then be loaded up directly, and it avoids all of the extra WordPress coding and the database accessing from happening. It just simply loads up a static version of the web page. So then when you go back, if you installed all this stuff and did all this optimization and something wasn't working correctly, you just simply deactivate and delete all of this software that you pulled off of it. The one exception to that, I believe, is in the Image Optimizer plugin. The Image Optimizer plugin, I'm almost positive that I saw somewhere that it actually overwrites your original images. However, I could have swore this had some kind of a backup option. Here we go. Delete originals. I actually have this, and I'm pretty sure by default this is disabled too. So even though it is going to be replacing that original image, you don't have to go into your live website and change any of the URLs and things of that nature that are pointing to the images. However, it does replace those original images, but as long as this particular option is not checked, it won't delete those originals, so they will still be in place. I'm wanting to say from this bulk optimized page, you can see the images that are already optimized right here. I don't know if you can actually undo them though with that plugin. You would want to go and look into the WP content folder. There's likely going to be a folder there that this plugin creates and puts those backed up original images into. This would obviously be covered with making a backup of your website though. If you were to just simply back up all of the files that are contained within any given WordPress website, you could restore all of those images much faster and easier in that manner by simply restoring those files instead of having to worry about backing up these image optimizations or finding the originals and replacing them over the new optimized files. In most cases though, the optimization part of this should likely not really give you any issues. Again, if it does though, make a backup obviously of your files. If you simply do the entire WP content folder, as a bare minimum, this would get all of the images that you have uploaded, and it would also get all of the additional images that would end up being pulled in as part of the optimize everything else scan that goes on right here. So for the most part, this is actually really a fairly safe practice to do on a site. It would be pretty hard to permanently mess something up with it. And the one exception there would maybe be with the images. But the way we're using the default settings on this image optimization plugin, it's not attempting to make the images reduced in file size so much to where they look different. It's trying to keep them looking exactly the same, but simply make the file sizes as small as they could possibly be while not reducing the image quality. So even then, the images should still end up being safe. Even if you were to go through and just deactivate and delete these different speed and caching plugins from the site, you should basically be able to restore the whole site to normal, even without a backup. I don't think there's anything that would be permanently altered as a result of this whole process. So pretty safe to do. Really doesn't require much, if any, in the way of technical knowledge. So should be something that you can pull off with ease and not have to worry too much about any consequences or things of that nature that may come along with it. What's my opinion about the plugins that automate the whole speed process? Do I check in here or we stay on the manual way? In a lot of ways, this I would kind of claim this to be automation for the most part. The images are all getting optimized for you automatically. As far as the page caching goes, how I recommended to go through and visit each of your live pages to get them cached up. The number 2 choice that I recommended, WP Super Cache, that plugin actually does a pretty good job of those types of things. Right, it's already right here. Hopefully this won't give me much, if any, in the way of errors trying to put this on top of another caching plugin that's already here. I wanted to point out, though, as long as I can get into this, okay, on the, sure it's not going to let me go to it, the preload page here, look for one of the buttons. It's the very last button all the way down at the bottom on the far right to preload the page cache, to where this actually goes through and it loads up all those different pages for you without you having to do that. So I would have this plugin set up like so. Here's the mobile device support that I mentioned to you earlier. So I want to set it up to cache. I want to use PHP to serve the cache files. The reason why I use PHP over mod rewrite, which mod rewrite is technically a little bit faster, but you need to use the PHP to be able to include the mobile device support. And then finally, cache rebuild, 304 not modified, compress the pages, these different options here. Other things like I increase the cache timeout very significantly. I'll go something like 86,400, which is a week. You might even go longer than that, possibly. Simply prevents the plugin from rechecking within a certain period of time. So you have a lot more options in this. It gives you the possibility of serving up the mobile pages where it's talking about the external plugin or theme required. That's where I was mentioning needing to use the mobile part of Weaver Extreme, which is all done automatically. All you really have to do is click on that checkbox to make that happen. But you set up all these settings here. You go to your preload page, and you can go ahead and preload all of it, and it'll automatically keep that up to date for you on top of it. So if you didn't want to have to go through, that's probably maybe one of the longer time-consuming parts of the whole process, is loading up all those pages publicly. It's not something you have to do. You don't have to go ahead and cache up every version of all of the pages on your site. It's simply going to make the first load of those pages better, to where you're kind of trying to prevent Google from picking up those pages, to be the first person to pick up that page and to have to generate that cached version, because it will cause the page to load slower the first time. WP Supercache will avoid that, but again, this is not something that I would use on top of WP Fastest Cache. I would be using one or the other. So depending on what you're trying to go for, you may or may not, be able to avoid kind of going the more automated route, if you will. You're quite welcome, Ryan. One other thing worth mentioning, if you do use WP Fastest Cache and do it exactly the way that I've taught to set it up in this training class, the way you're trying to combat this mobile score right here to get it as high up as you possibly can involves a lot of the other optimization that we're doing. The compressing of the HTML and the JavaScript, minifying that kind of stuff, optimizing the images that are on our site, and reducing our software down to a bare minimum. Even if we're not serving up a cached version of a page, all those different things do help to still speed up the website for us. So even if you can't serve a cached version to every single person that visits your website, going through all these other steps will still give you faster loading times than simply ignoring all of this stuff.